welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbeville. Gordon Kennedy had seen a lot of the world during his 31 years of military service that included a 15-month tour during Korea during that war, and then a year in Saigon near the end of the Vietnam War. When he left his final tour of duty in Jamaica, he had hardly even heard of Bryan, Texas. It was his next duty assignment as an intelligence specialist. He and his wife of 57 years, Lucille, have been here ever since. Please welcome Gordon Kennedy to Veterans of the Valley. Gordon, it's a pleasure to have you on Veterans of the Valley. You were born in Niagara Falls, so you're a New York guy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Before you finally made it down here. Talk about, you graduated from high school in 1949, the same year that you entered the service.
Right. Times were tough in New York in those days,
Right.
and there was very little employment. So I had a friend that had been in, was going back in, so he and I, he really enlisted and I enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
And from there on, there was the United States Army.
That's right, that's right. You made an observation to me about the difference between the World War II veteran and the veteran that you were that came
Right.
along a little bit later. Tell us that again.
Well, you know, the World War II vets drafted or were enlisted to go to war.
Mm-hmm.
My story, veterans of my time, was a little different. We enlisted just to get a job, most of us,
Right,
and eventually it became a career with me.
right,
So there's quite a difference in reasoning
right, right.
about service.
They were there to fight the war. You
Right.
you needed to make a living.
Right.
And indeed you did for 31 years in the Army. You actually got a little bit of influence of World War II after you went to Fort Hood. One of your first duties was at Tokyo at General MacArthur's headquarters.
Right.
So in a way you sort of caught a little bit of the occupation of
Right.
World War II.
Yeah, I missed getting the medal by about 3 or 4 days. I was only there 28 days. And
Right.
you had to be there 30 to get the occupation medal.
Right. Talk about though your training. Where was basic training?
In Fort Dix, New Jersey.
In Fort Dix, and then you went to Fort Hood and then
Hood.
to Tokyo. Korea broke out in July of 1950, and you
Right.
found yourself headed that way. Sort of talk about getting over there and what your duties were. And
Well, we made Incheon landing in early September, I believe, and the headquarters stayed around Incheon for about a month.
right,
Then we disembarked onto another troop ship and went around to Wonsan and set up headquarters there. I can't remember just how long.
right,
It's been a long time.
sure,
And then we took a narrow gauge railroad to Hungnam,
right,
and then we set up our major headquarters there.
right.
And from there, it get pretty rough.
Yeah, they said that it was secure. It was advertised as secure.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it wasn't as secure as
Not as you would hope to be. No.
as they advertised. As an intelligence specialist, more specific, sort of, what was your job?
Well, I didn't become an intelligence specialist until many years later.
Right,
But I was more or less the G2 sergeant the first time I went to a military attaché office in the American embassies.
right,
And like most G2 people, we reviewed documents, wrote reports for the attachés.
right,
I didn't really get involved in the intelligence gathering
right.
right off the bat.
Exactly, exactly. Well, we'll talk about that later. I want to go
Okay.
back to Korea. When you had gone on this railroad up to Hungnam, you talked about that one of your jobs was as a messenger
Yeah,
between the
from
Corps
the
and
Corps
Marine
headquarters and the 1st Marine Division.
Right,
Of course, they were on the line, poor devils, all the time.
right,
And on one of my trips up there, the Chinese broke through, surrounded the area,
right,
and the Marines had to fight their way out.
right, right.
And I was just tagging along, you
Yeah.
know. I never fired the rifle. I had it,
Yeah,
but I was not an infantryman,
right,
so I wasn't very experienced in fighting,
right,
quite frankly.
right, right,
But I knew how to move with them.
right,
They passed through our lines, just covered in ice,
Wow.
frozen, terrible.
Right.
The Marines were.
I know this time and this particular incident that you talk about, and it's hard. It's emotional, obviously,
Yeah.
for anybody in war, as it would be for anybody. But as best you can, it was at Coterie.
Coterie, yeah.
Coterie, and you found yourself surrounded.
Right.
Right.
Well, surrounded in the fact that the whole division
Right.
north of the Chosin River,
Mm-hmm.
or Chosin Reservoir, I'm sorry,
Right.
down to there was that was where we really make the breakout is Coterie.
Right. Right.
And they incurred 12,000 casualties,
Mm-hmm.
dead and missing.
Right.
And the 31st Infantry Division, Infantry Battalion was up there also.
Right.
They got very little credit for it, but they were there. They lost a lot of men.
How did you come to survive?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows? I tagged along with a group and we walked out.
You were with the right group.
Yeah, with the right group.
Indeed. I know we'll move on, but it's part of your service, obviously,
Right,
and it certainly is. You got out, they dumped you on some cargo ships, and let's talk about the weather, because about this time, we're talking, what, January, February?
Well, it was
December?
early
December.
early December.
And it was just bitterly cold.
Oh yeah, they put us on that cargo ship, and you know they have these covers they push over the holes,
Right.
and they just half closed it, and we were down in there. They issued us sea rations for the trip down to Busan, and we hit heavy weather, and the ocean just splashed over the decks right down in on. Not particularly on me, I was out back to the rear, but on some of the poor devils,
Right.
they just get soaked to the bone, pneumonia. I wouldn't believe all of them survived. I don't
Right.
really know.
Right.
But then we disembarked in Busan. I think it was 2 days. I really not clear about that, but I think it was 2 day trip
Right.
down there.
Well, as was the case in a lot in war, even World War II, people will tell you that fighting the elements was
Yeah.
sometimes as tough as fighting the enemy. And you certainly saw that. You went home in January of 1951, and you had, before you ever actually got out of school, you had met Lucille, and you
Yeah.
had dated, and then you got home and you married her in 1952.
Right.
Tell us about Lucille, about your wife. You all have been married some 57 years.
Oh, hey, she's been a good wife. I mean, as I say, we got married in '52, and she traveled with me.
Right.
There's only one trip overseas she didn't make, and that was when I was in Vietnam. But she went to Taiwan with me. That was a delayed trip. She come over after I went.
Right.
But every place else we traveled together, and she fit right in with the embassy community. She was really a fine host.
Right.
And you got to remember, she was a young lady in the early days, you know,
Right.
but she really conducted herself in an amazing fashion.
And she was ready to follow this guy that she loved all over the world, because she knew that her life would
Yeah.
change a lot,
Yeah.
right? You went to Fort Benning to train. What they were doing is training second lieutenants to actually
Right.
go back to Korea, but you'd pretty much had your fill of that.
Yeah, I put 12 weeks in OCS, and I got to think, I got a little wiser. They were training, as I said, they were training cannon fodder. And
Right.
so I resigned and was reassigned right there as cadre.
Right. Right. And then a piece of paper came across your desk that where you saw that there was an opening in Atlanta.
Right.
And this was actually going to be your first of 2 tours that would be in Atlanta.
Right.
So talk about this first one and what you did there.
Well, I went into supply. It was a reserve unit. It was a reserve headquarters that was in charge of all the reserves in Georgia. We had troops, units that met in the building that we worked in, and I was more or less their supply advisor. I did their work for them, but
Right.
and it lasted about 3 years.
Right.
And as I said, told you earlier, another piece of paper come across the desk.
We laughed about that a little bit
Yeah.
earlier. You were in these jobs, I guess, clerk type jobs, to
Right.
where you were at a desk and you sort of found out about these deployments before anybody else did.
Right.
So you got a little jump on things.
Right, they were premium assignments.
Right. And the next piece of paper that came across your desk talked about a position in Taiwan, right?
Right, it was a military military assistance. And I was assigned there. Again, I was a sergeant major in the G1 office.
Right.
I wasn't a sergeant major by rank, but by position I was.
Right.
And we served there for a little over 3 years. It was a good assignment, but rather mundane, you know.
Yeah.
Nothing exciting.
Right. But I guess it was the first overseas assignment that you took your wife and child.
Yes. Well, she followed. That's the assignment that
Right. She followed
She
later.
followed. I went over there in September, and she followed in October or November sometime.
Right. Right. With your son Richard.
Right.
At the time.
That was her first boat ride, and first time I ever out of the country.
Yeah.
Practically out of the county.
Right.
Where she grew up.
Right. That must have been a change for her.
Yeah. It certainly was.
Right. You were sergeant major in the general's office there, and then you went back to the States at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and that sort of led to your next tour in Atlanta. Is that right?
Well, I never went to Rucker.
That's right.
The general that we had in Taiwan took over the reserve program in the state of Georgia, and I was good friends with his secretary.
I see.
And I told her, I said, you know, when I come back, I'd like a job there. So I talked to the general while he still was in Taiwan, and he said, well, stop by and we'll see what we can do.
Right.
That's all he could promise me. But it worked out. I got my job there.
You got the job back in Atlanta. So you were back there.
Right.
So your tour took you. But you weren't there long, about another, 3 years or so?
No, I wasn't there. In fact, the officer I worked for was not very pleased that I wanted to leave. I'd only been there a year.
Oh, okay.
But I went to, this is when I entered the intelligence service.
Right.
I was sent to Washington and
To the embassy there.
no, I went there for training.
Right, okay.
And then from there I went to Poland,
I see.
the embassy in Poland.
Yeah. And this is sort of where your globe hopping really sort of started, started there. Poland, Hong Kong, Damascus, Finland.
Right.
Sort of take us a little globe hopping with you a little bit.
Well, excuse me. From Poland, as I said, we did 3 years there. That was during the Berlin crisis.
Right.
But when we left there, I went back. We went back to the United States, and I did a couple of weeks refresher course, and then we went on to Hong Kong. And same thing. My job primarily, I was copying books. All these books that come out of China, and I was photographing them all. You know, so I had my little cubby hole all by myself down in the basement, which was, I couldn't read any of it, but
Right.
I photographed it all.
I see.
And that went on for a long time. But anyways, from there, you know, it's starting to fade. From there, we went to,
You mentioned Hong Kong and Damascus, and you
Yeah,
also
we-
mentioned Finland.
yeah, well, we went to, we left Hong Kong on assignment to Washington where they commissioned me as a warrant officer.
Okay.
And then from there, we moved to Damascus. And that was during the 7-Day War.
Right.
Well, that's what it amounted to. We got there in January and got kicked out in July, June or July.
Right.
But seeing the tanks roll up to the city limits, the Israeli tanks, dogfighting over the city.
Right.
But anyways, we got out of there pretty safely. I left everything in place. My wife had a cat. She left all her furniture, all her groceries. And she went to Athens before me, and I was evacuated to Rome. But we finally got together in Athens and went back to the States, and I was reassigned to Helsinki.
Right.
And what a lush job that was. Beautiful.
You like Finland. You like the people there.
really- yeah.
You speak very highly of
Oh,
not
yeah.
only the country but the people.
People were just absolutely fantastic.
So you wouldn't mind being assigned to Finland tomorrow?
I'd go tomorrow,
You would
yes.
go tomorrow. Eventually, you came back from Europe to the United States to near home to Rochester, New York.
Yeah, I did a job tour there as an investigator. It wasn't, wasn't one of our happy times.
Right.
My wife lost her parents, and I lost mine.
Right.
But other than that, it was, routine stuff.
Exactly.
Interviews, just interview after interview after interview.
Right. And then you were deployed to Vietnam in January of '74. We're going to get to that in a moment, but we're going to take a look at some pictures that
Okay,
you supplied
fine.
us from some of your photo albums. So we've got a few pictures. Let's go ahead and go to those, and we'll see the young Gordon Kennedy. There's you at Lucille. You know
Right.
where that was taken?
Yeah, that was taken at the Marine Corps Ball in Warsaw, Poland.
In Warsaw, Poland. You look happy. You're having a good time.
Oh, we did have a
You've
good
been
time.
dancing all night, I can
Yeah.
tell. Okay.
There's
There's a couple of young kids.
You know, I don't really, I don't.
Looks like it was taken
I
in one of those
recognize
quarter
it,
photo
yeah,
booths or something,
yeah.
right? I just
It
thought
might have. I don't remember when that was. Early in our marriage, that's for sure.
that just had youth written all over it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a good one. Okay, let's move on. Now there's your wedding picture.
Wedding picture.
Handsome and beautiful. My goodness, y'all were both very happy. So that was in
52.
in 1952.
I'm just 20 years old.
Back from Korea.
Oh.
Here's your
You know that picture? I haven't seen that in a long. That was the picture I had to submit when I applied for a commission. They dressed you all up in your uniform and took a picture of you, and that was in your jacket, your records jacket.
Right.
When
Squared away soldier.
that's right. I was in intelligence school there. We all were going to be assigned to different embassies throughout the United, out the country.
Right.
I'm up there in the right hand, second from the right.
Only guy in glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah, there. The studious type.
Yeah.
There you go. This was taken in Vietnam.
Yeah, this was taken. General Homer Smith was the commanding general there. In fact, he is an Aggie.
Right.
That was taken on an occasion when I was about to leave. He presented me with a decoration.
Right.
I understand he's in San Antonio now, rather ill. That was taken on R&R from Korea. This is, I think this was in Yokohama. I don't remember the fella that's sitting there with me. We hooked up there and never seen him again.
R&R,
Right.
doing what you're supposed to.
Right. That's basic training. The fellow with me there, he's from, I know he was from New York, but I don't remember his name.
It's been a while.
Too many years.
It's been a while, Gordon. You know, if he saw the picture and if he's still with us, he probably wouldn't remember your name either.
Probably not. Probably not.
Good photographs, good
Right.
photographs for sure. Vietnam from January of '74 to January of 1975. Sort of give us a picture of Vietnam at that time, because actually the peace accords, the armistice, as it were, where it was actually getting in place already
Right.
when you got there.
I arrived, there was one company of Marines left, and they were proceeding to leave just momentarily. And I was one of 50 officers allowed in country at any one time,
Right.
According to the cords. And we watched it pretty close. If an officer coming in on TDY, somebody had to leave. And one of us, it wasn't never me, but somebody had to leave to make room for that extra body.
Right.
So we kept telling our superiors, civilian superiors, that they were coming. Oh no,
No.
oh no, they're not coming. Yeah, we tell them. I mean, that's what we were there for, you know.
Right.
Intelligence. We
Right.
were coming,
Right.
and they came.
Yeah.
Sadly, after I left in January of '75, is when they went out through the roof, the embassy.
Right.
Well, just prior to that, they had a big C-5A there, evacuating the orphan children, 300 some odd. And I had 3 secretaries aboard that aircraft that I'd worked with, and then when it crashed, they were killed. But then I had a good friend of mine, his wife, when she was Vietnamese, she finally got out, but he had to leave without her.
Right.
So it was a hard time on some folks.
Right.
You know. I enjoyed my assignment there. We weren't too bothered by the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese.
Right.
They were there. They'd float a mine down the river and blow it up along someplace, but they never attempted to strike us at all.
Indeed. 'Cause you were somewhat under protection of the peace accord, right?
Well, we like to think we were, yes.
Right.
I know of only one advisor that was killed. He was a civilian, and he broke a roadblock, and they shot him.
Right.
So,
Right. It must have been a very memorable time, an emotional time, knowing that you left in January of '75, and just 3 months later, in April of '75, is when the evacuation, as it were, took place, and the very famous picture that we've all seen of the chopper on top of the roof and the people coming up the ladder to the chopper. To actually see that as it was happening and know that that's where you were just 3 months earlier.
I remember the compound. I remember the flak outside of the flag bearer outside the embassy and all.
Right.
And they had a break-in into the embassy just before I arrived that got a couple of secretaries and one of the male was killed, but they killed all the Marines did a good job.
Right.
Better than you would expect them to. Well, they were outnumbered, but they did a good job.
Left Vietnam in January of '75, and your next deployment was Jamaica.
Jamaica. That was a lovely place, too.
Sure. Still is.
Yeah, when I was there, it was almost communism.
Right.
And that's the only place in the world that we were ever burglarized. We were burglarized twice.
Right.
But again, we worked pretty close with the Jamaican Armed Forces.
Right.
They didn't have much, but we worked pretty close with them in a supply program. We supplied them with various sundry of supply equipment.
Right.
And I was more or less involved in that.
Talk about a trip you took one time with, was it with a Navy officer as an attaché?
Oh, that was in...
And that you nearly got in trouble.
Yeah, that was in Poland.
Oh, that's in Poland. That's
Yeah.
right. We're going to backtrack, but it's a good story.
Yeah, well, we went, it was a naval officer, naval attaché.
Right.
And he was tasked with looking at the naval ports and their Navy air stations. And one time we went to a Navy air station, and I usually stayed with the car on what trips I went on, but this time he says, I'm going to put you out here, and I'm going on up the track there, see what I can see up there. Where he put me out was right at the end of the runway.
Right.
I was in a track of trees, so you couldn't see from the... But as I told you earlier, he had a diplomatic passport, and all I had was an official passport. When we got caught, he got thrown out, and I went to jail as a spy, So I had to tell him, I says, Commander, this is the last time I'm going to do this.
You didn't sign up for that.
And I didn't,
That's right.
I didn't do it again.
You had a wife and family. You didn't need to be going to jail in Poland. That's right. After the Jamaica deployment, you had a choice of your next deployment, Davenport, Iowa, or Bryan, Texas.
Right, and the only thing I knew is Davenport got a lot of snow. And so I chose Bryan, and there was a young civilian attaché there. He says, oh, I was in Bryan, College Station. I don't remember if he said he was in Aggie or not. I don't really remember. But he says, you're not going to like it there. It's dry. Well, it wasn't dry when I got
been here in a while.
Yeah, right. Well, he said he had.
Yeah.
So anyways, but it was a good thing I really came to Bryan, because the next winter, they had great big floods in Davenport. I mean, downtown was just, like 6 foot underwater.
Right.
So we made a wise decision.
Right. What was your job in Bryan? I know you worked downtown in the Federal Building.
Yeah. And again, I was a defense intelligence agent. That's what they called us.
Right.
And I did a lot of interviews, especially out to A&M, the young graduates out there getting commissioned.
Right.
They all needed security clearances. Now my job was to see that they could pass one,
These are background checks, right?
Right.
For potential officers or even civilians that would need the top clearance, right?
Yeah, I did, I think I had 4 or 5 counties here that I traveled in.
Right.
I had to do Huntsville, the university over there.
Right.
Blinn and Brenham.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the various out in the country, and I even had to go to the prison one time to do a background. Well, not a background. I interviewed this fellow that had been named as a reference.
I see.
So I was interviewing him as a reference.
Right. And eventually, speaking of a prison, you did some work at the Huntsville unit.
Yeah, I worked there for a year.
Huntsville.
Yeah, I worked there for a year.
At the Walls unit. Right?
Yeah, I rode back every day.
Right.
So
there was one kind of scary time.
Well, yeah, I was in charge of one of these tanks, and I was talking to a inmate, and he said he was having trouble with his cellmate.
Right.
And I was letting him out for lunch as he was talking to me, and as the line passed, I heard somebody yell, "Knife!" And I just took a step back, just one step back, and shoo, he opened my shirt.
Uh-huh.
But he wasn't after me, it was his cellmate, and he was after him.
You just got in the way.
Yeah, and this inmate that was talking to me, just one poke and knocked him down. It was all over.
It was. You'd been in tougher situations.
Oh,
right?
yeah, well.
You had that job was going to go civilian. You had hoped for that job. It didn't work out.
Right.
So you went to you stayed in civil service, as it were, and you were at the post office for 10 years.
10 years, right.
At the Bryan post office,
Right.
and then retired in 1991.
91.
Retired, and still living at the home.
Oh, yeah.
Where you retired.
Right.
And you've been very, very involved with the Veterans of Foreign War.
Yeah, for 20 years,
Right.
off and on. I've
Commander a couple of times.
commander a couple of times, their finance officer, quartermaster
Right.
for a good number of years.
Right.
But, you know, as time goes on, you get wore out, you kind of want to kick back a few years, you know, so I retired from that too.
Retired.
I just faded away.
Right. Like General MacArthur.
Right.
Right. Talk about your family. I know your daughter Holly lives in Arlington.
Right.
And your son Richard, who was in the service and actually was at in
Desert Storm.
right?
Yeah, he retired, 20 years service. He wanted to be near Mom, so he come here and brought his family with him, and he lives here in town. Works for the First National Bank
Right.
for 12 years, I think, or something like
Right. Right. And between Holly and Richard, you all have 4 grandkids
that. We have 4 grandkids and 2 great-grandchildren.
and 2 great-grandchildren.
Right. Rounded it out pretty nice.
Yeah. And I know that you're proud of all of them.
Oh, yes. I sure am.
31 years in service. If you had to do over again, you'd do exactly that, right?
Yes, I would. Yeah. It was good to me.
Yes.
It was good to me. I don't regret a minute of it.
Well, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me here.
Gordon Kennedy says that if he could go back to his Army job as an intelligence specialist, he would do it tomorrow. The career path he chose nearly 60 years ago as a way to make a living indeed became his passion, as has his volunteer service with the VFW. We salute Gordon Kennedy for his service to our country. I'm Tom Turbeville. Join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.